don't you worry, child. See, Gotcha's got a plan for you. Let's talk about Childe, shall we? Now, right now, Childe is in a rather weird spot, and I don't think, in the near future at least, he's going anywhere away from that weird spot. Here's why and here's how. So, as you know, if you're a player on a budget, or if you're a free-to-play player, right, completely, then obviously you have to have your team composition in a certain way, which is you would focus on your main damage dealer, and then your supports would just come after because you don't have all the resources that a paying customer would have access to. So you can only upgrade a single character to the max, maybe 2, if not 3. And since you already need 2 teams in Abyss following floor 5, including floor 5, you do need to max out 2 main damage dealers already as it is. Now, if you actually are a paying customer and you want to play the game to the full optimal, then obviously you have to invest in all of the characters, and then you just have to keep swapping between them in and out, right, all the time, as long as their Qs and E's are off cooldown. So you just spam their E's and Qs. Even then, you will have 1 or 2 characters maybe that you would stay on while you're waiting for all those cooldowns to come back up, especially if the set cooldowns are rather high. Now, I'm going to approach this from a free-to-play or budget perspective, as in you're not spending thousands and thousands of dollars to get all the characters, all the resources as soon as possible. That's going to be my assumption in this video. And I'm going to cater everything in this video towards such a crowd who doesn't want to spend so much money getting resources or getting all the characters. So this is essentially a free-to-play to budget Childe video. Now, oddly enough, Childe doesn't really fit into a free-to-play or budget team. And here's why. As you can see, his talent, the second one, his E skill, has a max cooldown of 45 seconds. And it has a max duration of 30 seconds. And your ultimate has an energy cost of 60 and a cooldown of 15 seconds. Now, the ultimate is going to be up fairly quickly. It's not a high-cost ultimate. And that's why Childe is actually a very, very powerful burst support, in my opinion. Because you can just swap to him, use his ultimate, swap back out. Think Mona, or think Beidou, where you use her E skill actually much more frequently, every 7 seconds or so, to deal some huge burst damage, and then swap out back to your main DPS, right? Now, the problem with Childe being the main DPS himself is that he's a bow user, and although you can build any character in this game, as long as you like the character and you have the items for it, and you maybe out-level the content perhaps, any character will work, so you can build any character in this game. And that's a matter of preference. I'm assuming we're beyond a matter of preference, and we're basically addressing what's optimal in a similar scenario here, comparing each character to one other. So in this case, if you already have a Diluc, or a Klee, or a Keqing, or even a Razor, would Childe be worth pulling for you right now, outside the aesthetics, outside the character's appeal? The short answer is no. And as for the long answer, just keep watching the video. I'll explain. So again, back to the point about Childe being a bow user. Bow attacks in general are quite underwhelming, except for the aim shot. Aim shot's pretty nice, but then you have to aim it. And it takes a while for it to charge. And it is good, it can be good if there's a weak spot on the enemy, but again, it's wasted time. If we're talking about optimal setup here, you don't want to waste time, you just want to keep dishing out damage as frequently as possible, as much as possible, keeping all of those ultimates up, all of those skills up, and especially your main DPS doing his job, doing work, dealing damage on the field. Now with Childe, his E deals a lot of damage. Don't get me wrong, his E deals a lot of damage. But if you keep it up for the max duration, then it is going to enter a 45-second cooldown. Now that's not an effective 15-second downtime here, it's actually a 45-second downtime, because the skill enters the cooldown as soon as you snap out of it. So as soon as you get out of your melee form, that's when the skill enters cooldown. And this is an enormous amount of downtime for Childe, because when he's off his E, as you can see here, this is great. You probably also want to use some charge attacks. They're pretty good. You probably want to job cancel them or something, animation cancel them in something else. But as you can see, I've only used it for what? Less than 10 seconds. It entered a 17-second cooldown. The minimum cooldown that you can trigger on his E is 6 full seconds. Now, if you use it for 6 full seconds, look, I'll try to show it for 7 seconds even. If you use it for 6 full seconds, that generally seems to be the optimal amount of time to use his skill. It adds another 6 seconds on top. So it becomes 13 seconds, 12, 13 seconds of downtime for Childe. Now you could argue you use his E, then you use his Q, it's a couple seconds animation, and then you swap out for about 10 seconds or so, and then you get back. And that's exactly the point I'm trying to make here. Childe is better off as a burst support unless you have the team for it. Because if you want more sustained DPS sort of role, then you will need a secondary DPS character to invest into. And he can perform very well in that role, don't get me wrong. He can dish out lots of damage. I'm sure you guys have all seen all of those enormous numbers on YouTube, which are a bit hyped, where people just stack their crit damage stats and have like low crit rates, lots of damage modifiers, and specifically set up for that damage. Don't get baited by those. Those are by all means nice to see, but you're looking at consistent damage over time. That's what matters the most. Not a single instance of 1 million damage. I mean, okay, if you can get a single instance of 1 million damage, do it. Beat the floor in 1 second. Be done with it, right? We're talking Abyss content anyway. But in Childe's case, he doesn't really outperform any of the existing hyper carries. Which ones are these? Again, Diluc, Klee, Keqing, and right after those are S tier, I would say. Right after those would be the likes of Razor. You can use Bennett as DPS also, I would say. He could be really good also, almost Diluc levels, meeting certain conditions such as staying in his queue. But those are the characters. If you have 2 of those characters already, just invest in those. In that instance, the only reason why you should roll this banner should be for aesthetical purposes, because you like the characters, because you want to have the characters. If you just want to have an optimal team, or if you just want a main DPS character while you already have one of those other characters, Childe is not for you. Now, if you're lacking a main DPS right now, and you're desperate to pull one, and you have Primogems saved, and you don't think you will need those Primogems anytime soon, as in, let's say, for the Zhongli banner, or the banner right after that, or but the banner right after that, because Primogem gains are quite scuffed, as you all know, if you're a free-to-play player, or if you're on a budget. Unless you have the monthly subscription, that kind of helps about 3,000-ish Primogems every month. Then it just becomes a saving game and a resource management game. So you really have to manage your resources very, very carefully. Primogems being the primary resource that needs to be managed very carefully. Because you're saving long term for a specific character's banner, so you can guarantee to pull that character. You need 180 wishes for guaranteed pity on a featured banner character. So if you want Xiao in the new feature, for instance, in a couple patches, let's say down the line, who knows when he's going to come. Then by that time, you need to have, what is it, 28,000 something Primogems saved in the bank already. That's a lot of Primogems. And at the current rate that we get in Primogems, excluding events and miscellaneous sources, if you farm Abyss consistently floors 9 through 12 every 2 weeks, and if you do the dailies every day, and some other stuff here and there, obviously, let's also give an arbitrary number for the events and corrections and miscellaneous rewards. You're not looking at that much. In fact, you're not even looking at... Okay, let's do a quick calculation here. You're getting 60 a day from just the daily commissions. You're looking at no more than 3,000, I would say, a month. 2,600, 2,800. Everything included, apart from the monthly pass, obviously, and the battle pass. If you own those, the monthly pass the monthly pass basically doubles that income, and then the battle pass also gives you a couple of fates and stuff, and 680 Primogems, something like that, I believe. So there's that. That would still take quite a long while to save up for a guaranteed pity. So you have to think very carefully before rolling Childe, and you have to bear in mind it's a limited time banner. No one knows when he's going to come back later again. So Constellation also plays a role here. Now, long term, obviously, if you're trying to roll a 5-star character, you probably won't be able to get a Constellation on that one either, because you've just been saving for the pity itself. But if you would consider a 4-star character, such as the likes of Razor or Bennett, then the chances are you'll be more likely to get at least a few Constellations. Childe is amazing at Constellation 6. Let me just show you his constellations, shall we? Let me first go through his talents real quick. This is a normal bow attack. The one special thing about Childe is though, I mean, the charged aim shot is water damage, obviously, hydro damage. He has this mechanic called Riptide, if you're not familiar with it yet. Riptide is basically a mark that's applied to the enemy. I'll show you in a second when I'm doing combat, and we're going to go frame by frame. I'm going to analyze Childe's combat and mechanics and attacks for you real quick, right after this explanation. Riptide is a debuff on the enemies that's shown with a triangular hydro icon, and it explodes the next time you deal hydro damage to the target. And it explodes in an area, and it explodes in over a couple of ticks. So it ticks, I believe, 4 or 5 times. We'll see in the frames in a minute. And they're smaller ticks, but they do add up. As you can see here, Riptide flash damage 3 times, and then you have one big burst initially. So Riptide flash damage 21% 3 times, then Riptide burst damage 105%. This is at level 9. Obviously his passive here is buffing his basic attack also to 9 from 8 that we get in the trial run. This is the special thing going on for Childe, and his whole kit kind of revolves around this Riptide debuff mechanic. You basically apply this debuff, then you trigger it with hydro damage. It doesn't disappear, the trigger does not consume it. Very important. It sticks around, and you can just keep triggering it. That's where the majority of his damage comes from, apart from his ultimate. His ultimate is very good, we'll get to that, his burst. So his E turns his attacks into melee, and whenever his melee stance, you deal a crit damage. This is worded incorrectly, by the way, this is a translation error. It should read, whenever you get a crit in your melee stance, you will apply Riptide onto the enemies. Same applies for whenever you land any kind of aim shot on the enemies. It doesn't have to be a crit, it doesn't have to be a weak spot. Whenever you do an aim shot on the target, it will apply Riptide. And whenever you crit in your melee stance, it will apply Riptide. And obviously all of your melee attacks will keep triggering that Riptide for explosion damage over and over again. And obviously as you keep critting with your melee attacks, it will reapply the Riptide refresh its duration. So it becomes an endless loop as long as you have your E active and you have at least a certain amount of crit rate for it to not ever occur. Because once you get this passive, Riptide duration becomes 18 whopping seconds. Very long. It doesn't get consumed again. 18 seconds. You have 18 seconds to reapply it again. So you don't need much crit chance either, to be honest. Even though, as usually with all characters it is, a sweet spot of around 50% is nice to capture, so you should try for that. That is his E, basically. It's really good. It's really nice sustained damage for the entire duration of it, but again, very long cooldown. Now, as for his Q, he has 2 Qs. One is in his range stance, and the other one is in his E melee stance. The range one deals a slightly less damage than the melee polearm kind of hydro polearm sweep. The range one's a bow, a hydro bow, and yet it returns a portion of its energy costs after use, so there's that going for it. It applies Riptide, but the melee one, it doesn't return energy, but it triggers the Riptide blast, which is this one right here. So if you can use the melee one, always use the melee one. It's just more damage in total, a lot more. But for instance, you can't for some reason because there's a Venti ult and the enemies are raised too up high. By the way, quick tip about Venti ultimate, if his level is way below the enemies, he won't lift them up too high, so you might want to keep your Venti lower level, especially if you're low on resources. Quick free-to-play tip, perhaps. Okay, tip over. So this will be massive damage. Look at the ratios. It's insane amount of damage. And then Riptide on top of that. It's a huge burst. This is comparable to Mona, right? And when we look at his constellations, this decreases cooldown, which is all nice because it's a long-ass cooldown. This decreases it by about 8 seconds, 9 seconds. And this gives him energy whenever your opponents are defeated by Riptide, which is very nice. Although not entirely overpowered or anything. Increases level, always good. Now, you see here, triggers Riptide Flash. If Totalia is in Foul Legacy Raging Tide's melee stance, triggers Riptide Slash against opponents on the field affected by Riptide every 4 seconds, otherwise triggers Riptide Flash. Riptide Slashes and Riptide Flashes triggered by this constellation effect are not subject to the time intervals that would typically apply to these 2 Riptide effects, nor do they have any effect on those time intervals. What this essentially means, it's going to either apply this, or if it can't apply that, it will apply this. Every 4 seconds. It's a pretty powerful constellation, but it's not the best one. Again, level increase, always nice. Here's the best one. If you are rich enough or lucky enough, dare I say, to get a C6 Child, then whenever you have your ultimate cast and melee stance, the cooldown of your E is reset. This effect will only take place once Tartaglia returns to his ranged stance, which is not a problem. You just cancel it. Because at that point, it's reset anyway. So what you do in that case is that you activate your melee. Oh, I suppose we just deactivated it. You activate your melee, you attack rounds. As soon as your Q's up, if your Q's already up, use it. You use your Q, you press E again to cancel your E. Then you can press E again to reactivate E. And remember, it's all hydro damage in E and huge amounts of it. And remember, if you have C6, it also means that you have C2, obviously, which is quite a bit of energy return for you, especially if you're running a Xingqiu in the party to generate even more hydro energy. That ultimate is going to be up every 15 seconds, almost guaranteed. Because, again, your E deals insane amounts of hydro damage. AoE also, because of Riptide. That thing's going to come up in no time, the Q. And you're going to keep spamming it, which means your E is essentially going to be 0 cooldown, because your E has a duration of 30. And you're going to use 2 Qs in that interval. So you're going to have constant uptime on your E, and every 15 seconds or so, your Q, which is huge burst damage. C6 Childe is an insane character, and yes, he can be your sole main DPS very easily, because you can just keep him on the field forever, right? And just switch to other characters just to use their Qs and Es every now and then, if they're worth it. If you're too free to play, maybe you only swap to 1 or 2 characters. One is a healer whenever necessary, and the other one is the main elemental reaction you're focusing on. Let me show you how good C0 Childe really is. Look, I'm just doing, you know, normal E attacks, melee. Look at the amounts of damage. These are level 80 characters, level 80 opponents. Hilichurls have 10% resistance, both elemental and physical. Slimes too, same way. I mean, these are Hydro, obviously, so it vaporizes once, but then it dissipates the Pyro element on them, the Pyro aura. But look at this damage. Did you see that damage? That's pretty good damage given our stats right now. 1400 attack, 72 crit, 21 Hydro. Bear in mind, Childe gets Hydro with every ascension, alright? And our weapon is crap right now. You don't want to use Favonius Warbow on Childe. You want to use Rust if you're going for a 4-star, or you want to use Skyward Harp, obviously, if you have it. Now, if you refine Rust, it gets as good as, if not better, than Refinement 0 Skyward Harp at Refinement 5. So if you have a refined Rust, use it. If you don't have a Rust nor a Skyward Harp, then another alternative, especially if you're going Burst Childe, Burst Support Childe, or you're mainly focusing on his Q damage, go for Slingshot. You know why it's good. Boosts your damage. And look, this is range ultimate. As you can see, it's much less overwhelming. It's underwhelming, if anything, compared to the melee ultimate. Now, look how fast I get energy back. Just a couple melee attacks. I just got like 20% of my energy back there. Look, see? Pay attention. Look at these Abyss Mage shields. Gone in a second. He's good. I'm not going to suggest that by any stretch of imagination. He's a bad character. He deals good damage, he has good energy regeneration, and he has good damage. But again, does he make sense in your team, especially as a free-to-play character, a free-to-play person, account, or if you're playing on a budget? No, it doesn't. Look, this is Riptide. I'm triggering it. I can apply it without crits, as you can see, with aim shot, and I can trigger it without crit also with aim shot. It's just the melee that needs to crit to apply it, but then every melee, normal melee, will also trigger it. It's insane amount of damage, no doubt. But please, please, please do not pay heed to all of those videos claiming he's OP, claiming he's the best character ever. At this point, it's just view farming, really. And I understand people are excited about a new character. They want to show how awesome he is. Maybe they really feel, you know, they see the big numbers, they build him up, they show you that way. They play on specific floors with low crit chance but high crit damage for big numbers. Floor 7 especially with the higher crit damage. Here's another thing to consider. Childe doesn't really have many artifacts going for him right now. The best bet right now is either to go for a burst damage build or a sustain build. And for burst, you will probably want to go 2 Noblesse Oblige and 2 Wanderer's Troop. And for the sustain build, you'll probably want to go 2 Noblesse Oblige and 2 Gladiators. But for the sustain one, you really want him to be C6, because otherwise it doesn't make much sense. Otherwise, just play the burst chart if you're not C6. And just use his E for about 5 to 6 seconds. Do a couple charged, maybe, you know, and then switch back. 6 seconds, that's it. And then use his Q. You know, it's also good for energy regeneration, those 6 seconds. That seems to be the optimum time frame, basically. Now, if you're C0 Child, just to give you an example, if you already have Razor, right? Because let's face it, Hydra Element is not particularly favored. There are no Hydra Element boosts or buffs on Abyss. There are no Hydra Element sets yet in the game. So that's why I suggested those other sets. Noblesse Oblige, Wondrous Troop, or Gladiator. You could also go Ball-Eyed if you have Shield Generation. You could have Shield on Child through Noelle, Diona, whomever you have, and you could boost his damage that way. But to be honest, at that point it just becomes a bit cumbersome. Could be good, needs more testing. But the main point being, there's no Hydra set in the game right now, so he definitely can't compete with Diluc or Klee. Pyro being the favorite element in the entire game, thanks to miHoYo, God knows why. It just is the way. You just have to accept and move on. Pyro's favored in Spiral Abyss, Pyro's favored in general. Also with the kind of reactions it has. Hydra's not awful, but Hydra doesn't have a bonus, a boost, a buff in Abyss. Hydra doesn't have a set like Crimson Witch for Pyro. And that's basically it. I mean, Electro's very scuffed also, but if you have a Razor who's going physical damage with Superconduct, or you can go Electro damage with Thunder Fury, obviously. They will perform similarly. Electro can be a bit better depending on circumstances if you have the ideal team, but it's much easier to go Superconduct physical route and deal equal, if not otherwise more damage, because you wouldn't have the optimal team composition for an Electro Razor or the build. So he's comparable to Razor. A C0 Child, a 5-star from a temporary event banner, is comparable to a character that you could just get with Star Glitter a month ago. C0 to C0. They do comparable damage. They do the same damage. If not, maybe Razor a bit more depending on the circumstance. If not, maybe Child more depending on the circumstances. But do consider that. If you have a Razor, just use him instead. If you really love Child and just want to have him just because you love the character, get him right now. Otherwise, don't bother. Even if you're a paying player, just don't bother. He doesn't outperform any of the current meta top carries, such as, again, Diluc, Klee, Keqing, even Razor. He doesn't outperform any of those. So if you have any 2 of those, you have absolutely no reason to pull Child, especially not for Abyss content, because he only performs well in floor 10, and the argument that he would help you in floor 10 because it's Pyro is moot, because you should just build for floor 12. If you can beat floor 12, you can beat any other floor beneath it, just through brute force. You could also argue, obviously, you will be able to beat Abyss content eventually when you build your characters, which is true. But we're talking about right now, and we're talking about a temporary banner that's going to expire soon, in about 2 weeks or more. And we're talking whether you should waste your very, very precious, hard-earned Primogems on trying to pull him and have him in your team as your main DPS. Don't be fooled. He won't be able to replace your current main DPSs, unless you lack one, in which case, again, he's comparable to Razor. So if you want someone comparable to Razor in terms of damage, give or take, then by all means pull him. But do remember, it's hard to pull a 5-star. It's very difficult to get a pity. It's not so difficult to get a Razor, perhaps. With all that being said, we're still at early stages of playing as Child and testing him. So do bear in mind, in time things can change. In time people can discover new ways to play him. In time we can have new item sets that will make him amazing. We already hinted towards Hydra sets. So who knows how great those are going to be. I already know of a couple of the Cryo sets we're going to have with the Dragon Spine patch, which is patch 1.2, hopefully. But who knows, maybe he's going to have great Hydra sets. And that could easily maybe carry him on the top. Who knows, new content might favor Hydra. Although doubtful, because Dragon Spine as a region is an icy mountain. So I'm expecting more Pyro dominance, unfortunately. But we'll see. It's all speculation at this point. There are some leaks, but I'm not going to talk about leaks. You never know. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that's been Child. Hope the video helped you. Hope you enjoyed it. And truly hope that you'll make the right decision for you at this moment, based on what I told you and based on what you've learned, what you've managed to scour through internet and other sources. Do your research. Don't rely on single hype videos. Don't waste your month's worth of Primogems just because someone random told you to get a character he's OP, because he's flavor of the month or he's just featured on the banner, right? Anyway, that's Child. Please subscribe, drop a like, and drop a comment. Helps the channel. We still need to grow. We're still only at half the subs we need for the 5,000 Primogem giveaway. That's right, that's still going on. I haven't forgotten about it. I will never forget about it. We just need to get the 1k subs, and then one lucky winner is going to have his 5k Primogems. And Ascension Forks, those who are watching, I haven't forgotten about you either. I'm also going to do a giveaway at 1k subs for Ascension World of Warcraft server with in-game items and gold. I'll announce at a later date. Alright, that's pretty much it, guys. Take care.